Hello everyone and welcome to this short session where what we're going to do is give some key information about Victor Frankenstein's character, why he's included in Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, some key quotations and some context you might want to use when you're writing an essay or creating an essay plan on Victor Frankenstein. There is a longer video this week which is looking at how to write an essay plan, but obviously I'm aware that some people might not be particularly ready to do that yet, and you might need a bit more information about Victor. And first of all, what I'm going to do is go through, and there's a PowerPoint attached with this, so you've got all my notes on the slide there as well. I'm just going to go through Victor's character. Now, Mary Shelley developed Victor's character as the events of the novel unfold, so she kind of teases and hints at things in Victor's childhood that happen later on. I need to understand how Victor's character develops and why Mary Shelley does this. This should be your first port of call for any character in any text in literature, whether it's Beth or Frankenstein, and you should be thinking about, right, how does this individual character start, what happens in the middle and what happens at the end. And we're quite flexible with middle and end and obviously beginning there as well. So I've deliberately not mentioned the fact that obviously the novel starts with Victor being rescued by Walton. Kind of comes in later on. The novel does start that way, but then it goes into Victor's narrative. So I've started from Victor's narrative. Victor's born into a noble Swiss family in Geneva. He is born in Naples, but his family are Swiss. He's overindulged as a child by his parents, and we'll talk about that later on, but the fact that he's overindulged means that he doesn't learn those boundaries that perhaps some of us know. He doesn't learn the difference between morally right and wrong, and this then leads to his behaviour later on in the middle and at the end of the novel. Promised Elizabeth as a future wife, which kind of perhaps gives him his opinion of life. He develops a love for science from watching a tree, gets burnt in a lightning storm as well, and he starts to read scientific text. His mum dies, and it's not really mentioned so much in the novel. Obviously, Mary Shelley's mother dies, so there are those links here. Mary Shelley died days after Shelley was born, but there are those links there, and also this potential, why is he so keen to life? And obviously it's because he wants to potentially bring his back at some point. That isn't mentioned in the novel. He goes on to study science at Ingolstadt University. It's a range of kind of modern physics, chemistry and maths, but he goes away to Germany to study, and he becomes obsessed with creating life, and he wants to create a new species who worship him as a god. He does want to do it for kind of good reasons, but also for kind of that hero worship as well. He gets around to building the creature and rejects the creature based on its appearance. And I know this is kind of, we're talking about chapter 5, chapter 6 here really, but obviously thinking about kind of, you've got the novel split between Victor's narrative and the creature's narrative, so I know it's not technically the middle, it's quite near the start, but that's why I put it here. Obviously he rejects the creature, he has a kind of a nervous fit there as well, and he recovers from his nervous fit, goes home, or gets a letter saying that obviously William has been murdered, Justine has been accused of the murder, and he keeps quiet while Justine is executed for William's murder. He could say something, but he doesn't. He chooses not to say something. Then he finally meets the creature and behaves aggressively towards the creature. Obviously, he blames the creature rightly for the murder of William and the framing of Justine's murder, but he's not interested in why the creature's done this. He just judges him. He goes away and then he kind of agrees to build a female creature, but he changes his mind and destroys it, and the creature's watching this as well. And kind of following this really marks the kind of, the ascent of his downfall. Things start to kind of, it's a bit of a cliche term, they start to speed up really. Shelley speeds up this, gradually Victor starts to lose everything now. He loses his mental state as well. He's accused and imprisoned for Clerval's murder. The creature murders Clerval. The body of the creature washes up on the shores of Ireland. Victor kind of falls asleep in a boat and then is accused of his murder. He washes up there as well. Then of course he tries to get back to normality. He tries to kind of marry Elizabeth, and he believes the creature gives him, I'll be with you on your wedding night, and he believes that the creature will be him, not Elizabeth. He's naive. He doesn't even entertain the idea. He thinks that he's so blinded by revenge, he thinks that he's going to die, not Elizabeth. And then after Elizabeth's death, he devotes the rest of his life to finding and killing the creature. And I think there's some people who actually think he's going to succeed, and of course he isn't. The creature is always physically stronger than him in every way in the novel. The creature is smarter and more intelligent than him in the novel as well. So this is naive as well, the fact that he thinks he's going to find and kill the creature, and the creature kind of plays with him as well, leaving him little clues and taking him on this trail across the world, really. And finally, he dies due to the overexposure to the conditions. You know, he's on the pole, he's in a boat, he's on a sledge, sorry, he's freezing to death, and he's been taken on the boat, and then that's not enough to save him. And this is happening right at the start of the novel, so you've got that potentially, you know, that kind of this idea that the novel just takes place in one place. But all these kind of early things that happen in Victor's life, this arrogance, this idea that he's given Elizabeth, you know, kind of shape Mary Shelley on purpose to shape what happens as this develops. And obviously in the exam you get an extract which will either be from the beginning, middle or end. If it's Victor, it'll be one of these things there as well. So you need to know what happens, and you also need to know why those things happening are important later on. There's a list of key quotations. There's no such thing as one right or wrong quotation to learn, but you need to learn some from the beginning, some from the middle, and some from the end. Obviously, you'll get an extract, which you'll have one or two things to say about that extract, and you need to know if that extract's from the middle, one from the beginning, one from the end, from the end, one from the beginning, one from the middle. There's a couple of ones that we find students use, but again, there are loads. The idea is, though, to move away from learning the 170 pages of the novel and just getting some key quotations down. So here are some you're welcome to have for Victor. This is Victor to Walton at the start about his voyage to the North Pole and his ambition. I ardently hope that the gratification of your wishes may not be a serpent to sting you. Think as well about your keywords that you could analyse. This idea of serpent to sting you. You know, this idea that don't you be as ambitious as I was, because it will lead you to kind of suffer pain as well. Don't be tempted, you know, the snake in the Garden of Eden who do things that are outside of your control, because it will come back to sting you. And although Victor sounds like he's trying to teach Walton the lesson there, he doesn't really take that lesson on board, neither Walton nor Victor. Victor's lack of boundaries as a child foreshadowing his lack of boundaries as an adult, their plaything and their idol. His parents view him as an idol, a thing to be played with, and obviously he then goes on and sees life in that way. He has got a noble aim of creating human life, possibly linked to his mother, pour a torrent of light into our dark world. His world is dark following the death of his mother, and this idea that he could bring light into that world, but again, biblical imagery there. His arrogance, you know, he wants to create new life, and that reflects contemporary scientists at the time, you know, Galvani, Aldini, all the scientists you've seen who were desperate to claim the glory of life. A new species would bless me as its creator and source. Words like bless, you know, he wants to be viewed as a god here as well, who finds this species, but he doesn't accept any of the responsibility. Having created the creature, he isn't filled with joy. It's breathless horror and disgust, and we analysed that in the other video. And when he first meets the creature, he calls him a wretch, a filthy demon. The novel is full of the word wretch. Victor calls himself a wretch, Victor calls himself a creature, but here Victor aggressively labels the creature, and actually that then leads the creature to become a wretch, a self-fulfilling prophecy. And also, you know, you could argue that actually Victor's the more wretched because of the way he behaves. And think about little one-word quotations. These are all quite long, but you can cut them down into one words. The creature views Victor as a tyrant and tormentor, so Victor views himself as a god to be blessed, and the creature actually views Victor as a tyrant, you know, an evil character, a tormentor, someone who has brought misery. Although Victor probably feels being tormented by the creature, it's actually the other way around. You know, Victor kind of rejects the creature, leading to all the events of the novel unfolding. The creature's threat to Victor about Elizabeth, there's an H missing for some reason on my point here. I'll be with you on your wedding night. This idea that, you know, the threat is made, it's a kind of biblical justice, really. It's this: you've killed my wife, you've created my female creature and destroyed it, so I'm going to be with you on your wedding night. And Victor naively thinks that it's him who's going to be killed, and in actual fact it's Elizabeth. Shelley's use of dramatic irony, showing Victor's naivety. This idea that the monster had blinded me to his real intention. So Victor Frankenstein, because it's him narrating, he never fully appreciates that it's actually not him who's going to be killed, it's Elizabeth. And Mary Shelley does this on purpose. And the monster had blinded me to his real intentions. This is quite a nice quotation, because you've got the monster, meaning the creature, but also the monster potentially meaning, you know, jealousy or anger. He's blinded. Victor's blinded by rage and revenge here. And that he blinds himself, really. Not the creature does nothing. You know, the creature has given him the threat. He's responded to what Victor's done, and Victor takes on this aboard. And even when Victor dies, Walton has a biased view of Victor's death. He believes he's a glorious spirit who's untimely, you know, suffers an untimely extinction here. Walton believes that Victor's kind of this innocent and great character, right throughout the novel. He views him as a great friend, and actually it shows that he's learnt nothing from Victor's narrative. And Walton then tries to get the crew to push forward to the North Pole. Victor urges them on towards the North Pole, and ultimately they mutiny, say we're not going to the North Pole, refuse him, and Walton's dream is over with a bit less pain than Victor's there as well. There's some key quotations you can use. And also some students find this quite difficult when we come to look at context and wider ideas. Basically, how can you link in things, big ideas to the characters in Frankenstein? And these are something to do with Victor, and I'll explain these for you here. First of all, we've got some historical context. Never put a one-sentence bolt on when we're doing context in Frankenstein. One of the things Mary Shelley does with Victor's character, particularly when he's interested in science, if you got that as an extract of using that quotation, is she shows him as a contemporary scientist playing God. This idea that scientists at the time went beyond ethical boundaries. The fact that they used dead body parts to experiment on. They used the bodies of the poor murderers in society for experimentation. If that was to happen now, there'd be outrage in the press, and there was outrage back then as well. They're pushing ethical boundaries. Creating life is going beyond what's ethically acceptable now as it was then as well. And this idea that if you're pretending to be God, you deserve to be punished religiously, morally, legally for that act, and also for not accepting the responsibility of your actions as well. This idea of revolution. Two things you could look at this, and it's in one of the first home learning videos. Victor could represent a failed challenge to God's power. Victor tries to create life, which is a direct challenge to God, because at the time people believed God created life, and that's a metaphor for how people revolted against organisations like the church during things like the French Revolution. They viewed the church as corrupt, they viewed the church as trying to control them, and Victor could be trying to revolt against that, and ultimately his revolution fails. But on the other hand, the creature could represent revolution and killing Victor's family. By doing that, by killing Victor's family, by Victor's death at the end, this idea that revolution, things like the French Revolution, could succeed. There was talk of an English revolution at the time as well, to overthrow the king and the church and to kind of give power to the people. And this idea that revolution could succeed. And that's kind of seen in the start of the novel, opening pages, the information. The role of women. Victor's promised Elizabeth as a pretty present for my Victor, showing her treatment as a possession, and this then leads Victor to view all human life as a possession. The creature is just something to be experimented with. Body parts of people's loved ones are there for him to use as he pleases. And Shelley's life. Victor could be a representation of William Godwin, Mary Shelley's father, who rejected Mary following her relationship with Percy Shelley, basically disowned her. Victor's death could be an ominous message to Shelley's own father. It's this idea that, ultimately, Dad, you will die at some point, and I will be left to survive as the creature is. I will survive you, and the memories I have with you will not be pleasant. This idea that you should have taken responsibility for me in the same way that Victor should have taken responsibility for the creature. You've got nature versus nurture, wider ideas. Nature versus nurture is a popular one. It's down here twice for two reasons. First of all, kind of tying into revolution. Victor's raised as a member of the upper classes, and from his childhood, learns to have little respect for the lower classes. He has a sheltered and privileged life because he's seen as an idol by his children. He can do no wrong. Justine Moritz is from a lower class, for instance, and when she is executed, Victor, he mentions about they wouldn't believe me. He doesn't even try to speak up. He refuses to take responsibility for her death, and she is a member of the lower class. He refuses to accept the creature as his kind of creation and take responsibility for that. He steals the body parts of the lowest members of society, and this shows a kind of a disdain for the working class, and that ties into this idea of revolution here. This idea that the creature rises up against Victor and his family, and they maybe deserve what they get for their treatment of people in society. Nature versus nurture, on the other hand. Victor has a loving childhood, and this contrasts with the lack of empathy he shows the creature. Victor has learned how to be a good human being. He's learned from his parents how to show love. Perhaps the boundaries of love is too much in the way that he's given Elizabeth as a possession, but he doesn't do that himself. The creature does that. The creature tries to show love to society and is rejected by the Delacys, but Victor doesn't. Victor has a complete lack of empathy for the creature, and by labelling the creature as a wretch and a vile insect, this becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The creature looks like a monster, and he's treated like a monster by society, by his father, Victor here. And this is the idea of John Locke's tabula rasa. The creature is not like a slate, a tabula rasa, and his behaviour is shaped by society, by his father's rejection of him, by every time he meets his father, him being called a wretch, a vile insect, a monster, by his father trying to kill him every time he meets him as well, and obviously failing. And as a result of this, the creature becomes a monster. And I know a lot of people feel sorry for the creature. I know the questions on Victor, but you still, you get your marks for exploring this idea of context. The creature murders people, and he murders people in response to Victor's treatment. You could also argue that Victor is the true monster for his neglect of the creature. Victor, whether you like it or not, Victor is responsible for the murders of his own family because of his rejection of the creature, his neglect of the creature. Because if he accepted the creature, if he made space for him in his family unit, then none of the events of the novel would happen. And finally, tragedy. Victor is seen as the classic tragic hero. He's born into a family of high status, and he's punished for his harm, which is a fatal flaw in a character. Victor has a lot. The creature has some as well, but we'll look at those when we come to the creature. Victor is arrogant. He's so arrogant. He is so egotistical and driven by self that he can't see other people in society. And ultimately, this leads to the deaths of his family and his own death at the end. And they are classic features of tragedy throughout the ages, starting from ancient Greek tragedy to modern day tragedy. Shakespearean tragedy has a lot of these elements as well. Just think about Macbeth, this idea that you have a character who is arrogant and egotistical. They are easily led by, in Victor's case, their own desires, in Macbeth's case, the witches, and that then leads to the downfall of themselves and everyone associated with them. And this is a key feature of tragedy that you could perhaps mention as well, because it's shown at the end in Victor's death. He dies because he's, Shelley uses features of tragedy there as well in her writing, and also he dies as a punishment for not accepting responsibility of his actions. So there are some key quotations, some context and wider ideas on how Victor's character develops. You've got the PowerPoint as well, so you can be working through that, you can be reading through that, and use these to make some of your notes as well when it comes to writing essays and revising Victor's character as well.